Well, our Defence Minister, Richard Marles, announced the biggest changes of the Defence Department in decades. It creates a new agency to run major projects to prevent multi-billion-dollar procurement blowouts. So, will that be successful? Joining me live now is former Home Affairs Secretary Mike Pezzullo. Mike, great to see you. Let's talk about these defence procurement reforms. You've looked at the framework here. Will they do what they intend to?
They have the potential to, Laura, if it's just simply reshuffling a number of currently existing bureaucratic groupings within Defence and just simply changing business cards, it won't work. But that's not the Minister's intention. I think both Ministers Marles and Conroy have stated quite clearly that that's not their intention. How this will work, and there's a couple of points that I'd like to make, which hopefully can be picked up in the transition period. The government's allowed itself 18 months to transition to this new arrangement. Personally, I think that's too long. I can understand why they've done it, but I would like to see a greater sense of urgency, and I'll explain why in a moment when I come back to that. But in terms of the actual structure, structures help, but really it's about culture and leadership. If they stand up this organisation as they've described it, and they empower the National Armaments Director, who will be the head of the organisation, to drive hard, to be innovative, to take risk, and to be prepared to be held accountable after the event. In other words, if an audit comes along or if there's a question of probity or a question of schedule delay, as long as that director can demonstrate how and why they made their decisions, they should be given free rein to make the best decisions they can on the spot to rapidly acquire materiel. If they're just sitting back, hamstrung by red tape, as is the situation now, there will be no improvement, frankly.
So why do you think, first of all, you know, we talk a lot about different issues in defence. This is similar to what you suggested a little while ago. Let's talk about the timeline then, because these things always take a long time. Defence is a huge department, a huge ship to turn around. Why do you think 18 months is too long? What would be a better time frame in your mind?
Look, I can see, let's take the positive view first. I can see why they've given themselves 18 months. They want to do a global search, I suspect. They want to get the right person in the job. They want to get all the hierarchical arrangements right. They want to put in place the right business processes. I get that. However, you and I also talk about the narrowing window, the urgency that is emerging. Putin is hardening his position. You just saw another package there. There could be a worsening of the situation in Europe. Very concerningly, as you and I have talked about previously, President Xi is hardening his position, certainly in the South China Sea, more recently with Japan, but especially worryingly with Taiwan. As I've said to you since I've been a regular attendee or guest on your show,
contributor.
I think the chance contributor, thank you. I think the chances of a war remain low, but they're material enough. They're in about the 10 to 20% range that we should be very concerned. In other words, I think as the situation in Asia gets more tense, there'll be a greater prospect of confrontation, but then hopefully a pulling back and no war. But let's say, God forbid, that war were to come. You know what would happen? It's a bit like during the pandemic. What would happen on the first day, Laura? All the red tape would be thrown out. Someone would be recruited. Someone would be given authority, make things happen. Why don't we set up that system now? As occurred in the Second World War, we had in Australia, Bob Menzies appointed the head of BHP. Essington Lewis, a legendary industrialist, and gave him free rein to basically work out whatever contractual arrangements he needed to put in place, whatever subcontracting arrangements, whatever supply chain arrangements he needed to put in place to generate munitions. John Curtin, who then followed Menzies after a brief period, was so impressed by Lewis's work, he made him the Director General not just of munitions, but he gave him aircraft production as well. President Roosevelt did the same thing in 1940 when it was becoming apparent that there could be a conflict, as tragically turned out to be the case later after Pearl Harbor was attacked. He got the general manager of General Motors to come in, Bill Knudsen, and said, Bill, you've got free rein, whatever arrangements, keep your receipts, but whatever arrangements you need to put in place, I need you to do things quickly. We should have the same, if you like, sense of urgency. It's important to keep the receipts. It's important to keep good records so that later on, when there's proper parliamentary scrutiny or say there's a corruption issue or there's an issue around probity or whatever the case might be, the armaments director needs to be able to point on the record as to how and why she or he made that decision. But largely they should be then given free rein to put in place whatever commercial arrangement they feel is necessary and they can justify to get things acquired quickly.
What about when it comes to, AUKUS? It's a multi-billion-dollar project. It's hard to get, I think, Australians excited about spending that amount of money on a couple of subs, the first of which we won't get for more than a decade. And then you talk about, this kind of near-term potential for conflict. It's terrifying that we are so utterly unprepared. In the long term, we seem to have all these prospects, but it seems a little naive.
Well, you and I have talked before about how we got into this position. In fact, it was one of our first interviews when you probed me on this issue. The reason why there's a capability gap in submarines is that the drive and the energy that Mr Rudd introduced into policy in 2009 was not carried through with. By now we should have, as I've said to you before, an evolved version of something like the Collins, 8 to 12 of those now, which we could have started building those and developing those back in 2010, and they would have started to deploy into the fleet in the late 2010s or the early 2020s. And then we could have jumped to the nuclear vessels, which we should ultimately go nuclear. I was always a supporter of that. And on that time frame, you'd start to get nuclear boats in the 2030s, but you'd have a strong fleet of more potent submarines now that would fill that gap. I agree with the government's position that the Australian Submarine Agency should be the driver of AUKUS. It's a very specialised type of procurement, which does require deep engineering, a transformation of our industrial base that I don't think many have appreciated to go nuclear, and also to put in place the appropriate regulatory arrangements to ensure that those nuclear reactors are kept safe. So I would keep AUKUS Pillar 1, and it sounds from all the reporting like that report has been received by the Australian government, and Mr Miles said he's going through it. OSMIN, the meeting with the Americans is due to be held next week, so hopefully there's a resolution of that. But as I said to you months ago, unless President Trump himself took some umbrage at Australia acquiring these vessels, it was always going to go through to the keeper. I don't think this review was ever going to unsettle AUKUS in the way that some of the more hysterical commentary would have suggested.
Yeah.
But then back on more near-term things, whether it's drones, missiles, torpedoes, other war stocks, we need to get those things more quickly. You're not going to get the submarines any more quickly than we are, Laura, but everything else, whether it's including Ghost Shark, uncrewed subsurface vessels, we need that rapid approach that I've been describing, and we need it, frankly, today. The government says it's going to take 18 months to put it in place. I respect and understand why they're doing that. I would, though, do it more urgently. And I'd be ruthless about it. Ruthless in the sense that you've just got to be determined and resolute. Some people are going to have to be let go, regrettably. They should be treated with dignity and with generosity. But I think the sooner we move to this model, you saw in the package that you just played, that Ukrainian, I think it was a farmer, who turned from farming to now making drones in his workshop or whatever it was. He would not have been thinking about doing that several years ago, but necessity forced that change. What I'm saying is let's get ahead of necessity.
Necessity, the mother of invention, particularly when it comes to wartime. Mike Pezzullo, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Laura.